And when I read over these verses, I'm amazed at how many of them apply to the women of that generation, and particularly to Anne. So I'd like to share with you now Proverbs 31. The hymn of the good wife. A good woman is hard to find and worth far more than diamonds. Her husband trusts her without reserve and never has reason to regret it. Never spiteful, she treats him generously all her long life. She shops around for the best yarns and cottons and enjoys knitting and sewing. She's like a trading ship that sails to faraway places and brings back exotic surprises. She's up before dawn preparing breakfast for her family and organizing her day. She looks over a field and buys it. Then with the money she's put aside, she plants a garden. First thing in the morning, she dresses for work, rolls up her sleeves, eager to get started. She senses the worth of her work, is in no hurry to call it quits for the day. She's skilled in the crafts of home and hearth, diligent in homemaking. She's quick to assist anyone in need, reaches out to help the poor. She doesn't worry about her family when it snows. Their winter clothes are all mended and ready to wear. She makes her own clothing and dresses in colorful linens and silks. Her husband is greatly respected when he deliberates with the city fathers. She designs gowns and sells them, brings the sweaters she knits to the dress shops. Her clothes are well made and elegant, and she always faces tomorrow with a smile. When she speaks, she has something worthwhile to say, and she always says it kindly. She keeps an eye on everyone in her household and keeps them all busy and productive. Her children respect and bless her. Her husband joins in with words of praise. Many women have done wonderful things, but you outclass them all, Anne. Charm can mislead and beauty soon fades. The woman to be admired and praised is the woman who lives in the fear of God. Give her everything she deserves. Festoon her life with praises. I'd now like to ask Anne to come up, and she's going to read a poem that Anne wrote to her children in 2003 titled, My Kids.
Okay, Mom said don't cry, so I'll try my best. I often think what it's meant to me over the years to have all of you as my daughters and sons. I like to think of all of the pride you all brought as I watched you all grow and shared in the joy of your achievements. And I like to think of all the love we shared and the closeness that has made you all my friend as well as my daughters and sons. I often think of how much you all mean to me. And each time I do, it's with happiness that I have daughters and sons as special as you all in my life. Love you all, Mom.
Thank you, Anne. And Pat is now going to come and share our poem with us.
I first want to thank a very good friend who knew that I collected old hymnals to read the verses as poetry. And she gave me this as I was watching Vigil over Mom. And so I read by her bedside, and when I found this poem, I thought it really represented the place where my mother was. and the place that she would be. So hear the words of healing on this. I walked through the woodland meadows where sweet the thrushes sing, and found on a bed of mosses a bird with a broken wing. I healed its wound each morning it sang the old sweet strain, but the bird with a broken pinion never soared so high again. I found a young life broken by the sin's seductive art, and touched with a Christ-like pity, I took him into my heart. He lived with a noble purpose and struggled not in vain, but the life of that sin had stricken never soared so high again. But the bird with a broken pinion kept another from the same, and the life that sin had stricken raised another from despair. For Christ the mighty healer has a balm for every pain, and the soul that he has healed, higher still may rise again.
Thank you, Pat. This time, we'd just like to open the floor. If anybody has a memory they'd like to share just from their seat of Anne, they'd like to share today.
I'm getting up. Okay, but those of you who don't know me, I'm Joanna Schofield, and I grew up on Winners Hollow Road, and I don't know what I'm going to say because I can't figure it out. But the Collins house and the Schofield's house were situated so that you could walk from one house to the other house through the woods. And there were 6 of them, 4 of us. Annie and I are the oldest. We were, I think we still are. But you know how you all have, you're all my friends. I know most of you. But then you have friends that are your family. And the 2 families were family. And Anne always listened to me. I had things that were happening that I needed to talk about. And I would go to Anne. She always talked to me. And every time I saw her, in maybe the 60 years or more that we've been together, she always helped me. And she always told me she loved me. And that's all I got. But there were kisses in the cornfield. I won't name names. It wasn't me. No, or him. We were the oldest. But our siblings, I had one brother who had a crush on 2 of the Collins girls. Yeah, and I know they meant the only thing they were old enough to know about was kissing. And yeah, we just, what, Sandy? What did you, yeah, you and Nancy are exempt. Because you were both too little. It was Jeff and those 2 Collins girls. Yeah.
Hey, Ann, if it wasn't the oldest and it wasn't the youngest.
Well, yeah, you figured it out. I love every one of you.
She's 31, works here so well. I take her to the store and I think she buy herself some treats and I take her home and she'd always have Slim Jims. And as soon as she got home, she'd open them up and give them to her dog.
Anyone else?
And it's my mother-in-law for 40-some years. But the day that I got married, in our wedding reception, my new mother-in-law comes up to me and she said, "She's yours now, and I get no refunds."
On August 19th, children born to John, Savannah, and Barbara Sporen. I'm not sure if I said that exactly right, but it was close. Both of Anne's parents were born in Czechoslovakia, along with her oldest sister, who was 10 months old when the family immigrated to the United States. Of John and Barbara's 10 children, only 5 of them would live to adulthood. Anne did not have an easy life growing up in Cleveland. Her father passed away when she was 5 years old, leaving her mother to raise the family in the St. Clair neighborhood of Cleveland. Anne's mother took in laundry and did other household things for the kids just to be able to support and maintain her family. She did what she had to do. She set a great example. When Anne was a little girl, her job was to walk the railroad tracks to pick up fallen coal that would then be used to heat the family home. When Anne was in the 8th grade, at just 14 years old, she quit school in order to work as a waitress. Her brothers were fighting in the war, and the extra money was needed in order to maintain the home. Anne also at one point worked in a chocolate factory and also for what is now known as Sherwin & Williams. When Anne was 19 years old, she met Chester Collins. He was actually dating Anne's older sister Barbara, and Anne was supposed to be their chaperone. Well, she must have done a wonderful job. Because Chester realized he was dating the wrong girl. And on May 6, 1950, Anne and Chester married at the Gospel Lutheran Church in Cleveland, Ohio. Anne's mother had gone blind, and so the newlyweds selflessly volunteered to live with her to help for her care. Soon their family grew with the coming of young Anne in 1950, Chester in 1953, Pat in 1954, Tom in 1955, Karen in 1956, and Sandy in 1961. Wow. Chester was a mechanic and a truck driver, and Anne was able to stay at home and tend to their children. Anne was a dutiful wife and mother, and she worried about Chester when he was out on the roads. And like the Proverbs woman, she put that worry into action, and she began sewing what she called worry rags. They were patchwork quilts that she made out of pieces of clothing that the kids no longer fit in. The family lived in Cleveland and later in Garfield Heights until 1962 when they moved to 5628 State Route 322 in Windsor, Ohio. Now, Pat could take full credit for making that move a reality. She was only 8 years old when she ran after a ball and almost got hit by a car outside their Garfield Heights home. And Anne and Chester decided right then and there on the spot that it was time to move their growing family out to the country where the kids would have more room to play and roam safely. We joked that chasing things across the street was a habit that Pat continued. We know she chased her beloved Tom across the street where he lived. The kids took full advantage. I didn't know how full of advantage, but they took full advantage of living in the country. I'm glad I didn't know the details. And they remember spending entire days playing outside. I thought that was all good and fun. Until their mom would ring the old school bell, and that would be their signal that it was time to come home for dinner. And did most of the child rearing as Chester was on the road. She allowed her kids the freedom to explore and adventure at will. and she raised very independent children. At the age of 51, Chester had a severe heart attack, and Ann used the talents that came natural to her to clean homes for several families in the area, which then allowed her to support her family, just as her mother had done. She did this for a good many years. Ann loved her vegetable and her flower gardens, and she enlisted, sometimes unwillingly, the help of her children to tend to those gardens so that she was able to can and provide food for them. Ann was very, very artistic. She could paint and draw, and her granddaughter Jamie remembers receiving beautiful greeting cards at the holidays that her grandmother had drawn for them. She said they were very elaborate and beautiful. One thing that Ann was never able to succeed at was to learn to drive. After his heart attack, Chester attempted to teach her how to drive the automobile, and one of those times Ann caught the side of the fuel tank outside of their home with her car, and that ended the lessons with Chester. Chester passed away in 1992, and the kids were determined that at the age of 64, their mother would learn to drive. They even brought her driver's education classes. Ann failed the driver's test at least 3 times. Ann adored her children and her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and she wanted them to have an easier life than she had. She was ready to be reunited in heaven with Chester and her parents and her siblings and others that had gone before her. She had marked in her prayer book passages that were written to help people as they mourned. I believe it was another way that Ann was trying to guide those of you who loved her in the days ahead. I'd like to share with you one of the prayers that she had marked in her prayer book. "O Lord, if it were not for the promise of the resurrection and life eternal, I could not endure this sorrow which has befallen me. Only the assurance of thy continual presence has enabled me to carry on during these lonely months. Only thy grace has preserved in me this faith which comforts me in an hour like this. O Lord, do not let me mourn as those who have no hope." Ann would not want any of you to mourn as people without hope. The prayer then goes on to speak of how God had provided for the writer's need and had been his guide, and it concludes with saying, "Give me grace to come to thee and find rest for my soul." Give me grace to come to thee and find rest for my soul. Ann has been given that grace, and she now has rest for her soul. Amen. Let's stand again if you're able, and let's sing another one of